While we're waiting for people to sit down, let's do a little informal poll. How many people came here to hear a super serious discussion about security? Good, not many of you, because this isn't going to be that serious. Who here came because they wanted to understand the experience of what it was like working at a place like Hollywood Video, something that does not exist anymore? I had a feeling that might be the case. All right, one more question. Who here really just showed up because they wanted to know whether they really made their employees wear bow ties? All right, well, you might find that out too. All right, great. I think we can get started. Can we put the slides up? All right, great. Thanks for coming today. Really appreciate it, everybody. I hope you find this interesting. I want to make this as entertaining and fun as possible, and I definitely want to give you guys a chance to ask questions at the end. Even if it's not serious, this is a pretty fun subject, and I'm hoping you all really enjoy it. My name's Ben. I'm the Senior Solutions Consultant at Independent Security Evaluators. I'll talk about that a little bit in a moment. But today, I'm going to talk about what my experiences working at Hollywood Video in the year 2000 taught me about security. I have to start. I had to put this slide in because I realized as I was putting this together that some people might not actually know what Hollywood Video is. Certain parts of the country, this place didn't exist at all. They had their own regional chains. People know Blockbuster, Family Video, whatever. Some people are so young that they never went to a video store. But anyway, Hollywood Video, we didn't have the internet. Back in my day, we couldn't just go and download whatever movie we wanted off of Netflix. We had to go to an actual store. And if you were lucky, your parents would let you maybe rent a video and an N64 game for the weekend, and you were pleased as you could be that you had the opportunity to play Diddy Kong Racing all weekend. You could hold on to this stuff for 3 days and return them into a big metal box or pay fees. In theory, there was a policy that we would fine you all the time if you didn't rewind the tapes. But as I can tell you from my experiences rewinding thousands of tapes, that did not happen. We sold snacks, and you even had to have a membership card. We had to license you to rent movies because it was such an important responsibility. A few other things about Hollywood Video. The commercial is accurate. That gentleman on the left looked kind of similar to how I did in the year 2000. They did, in fact, make us wear fake bow ties, cummerbunds, vests, and tuxedo shirts to go to work to make $5.15 an hour. That is the actual picture of the Hollywood Video store I worked at in Baltimore, Maryland. I somehow managed to find this old picture. The building does not exist anymore. It was demolished. That's on Reisterstown Road in Pikesville, Maryland, if you want to do a little homework on that. And that beauty of a car down there is the 1990 Toyota Camry DX. I happened to be fortunate enough to use my money working at Hollywood Video all summer to get a really nice car with 90,000 miles and a worn-out clutch. But that's why I did it. But who is ISC? We're a security consulting company. We discover a lot of vulnerabilities, things in iOS and Android, unhackable cars we managed to hack. If you go to our website, you can see all sorts of cool research we've done. We run the IoT Village at DEF CON and other events like this one. If you go downstairs into the vendor hall, we're doing a couple things today. We're having a CTF where you can win a lifetime badge to CypherCon, as well as some hacking demos that we're going to run throughout the day if you want to learn a little bit more about device hacking, web app hacking, and stuff like that. We specialize in white box security assessments, pen tests, whatever. The way I put it is if you have a product that you want to really find the true vulnerabilities on and do manual testing, that's what we do. We also offer a product called Start. Back there, the guy taking pictures of me right now, Scott, is at the Start booth, literally right outside the door. It's a different part of our business. It's third-party vendor risk management. I'm not going to talk about it that much. If you're interested in learning more about it, I definitely encourage you to go out there. We have a demo up. What do? I actually help people figure out an approach to managing the assessment process. It may not surprise you that a lot of times when people are getting into pen testing or application security, they haven't done this before. Maybe someone's knocking on their door and they're telling them that they need to do this for a SOC 2 or something like that. And so I'm usually the person they talk to about scoping, what their products run on, front end, back end, stuff like that. So there were a few issues working at Hollywood Video. It might not surprise you that this wasn't the tightest run ship. It was very much run on a shoestring budget. Typically, we would have 2 people working shifts. There were 2 shifts, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. and 5 p.m. to 1 a.m. And you would work an 8-hour shift typically, and there were 2 people. Now, you guys saw that picture of the store before. 2 people have to cover that entire store. And at certain times of day, that got pretty hectic. It also was bad because the HVAC did not work. And so as you're wearing your bow tie around, you were sweating uncontrollably. We had a terrible point of sale system that used computers that were fossils at the time that we were using them, like green screen stuff. And there was just a lot of stuff going on. Like, on a typical day, people would come in, they'd return tapes, you had to get the tapes back on the shelves. You have to, people would have complaints all the time that things weren't working. I'm gonna get into that a little bit more. You had to maintain the store, make it look clean, vacuum stuff up, management stuff, counting the registers, all sorts of stuff. So it was a really challenging job for a 17-year-old. We had one other problem. We had a little bit of shrinkage. I don't know if you know, it's a term, shrinkage is the term for loss and theft in retail. And we had a lot of it. All sorts of problems keeping their assets under control. So the bigger point of this talk is that we're gonna sort of analyze the situation in Hollywood Video. We're gonna understand what they actually controlled, what security controls we had in place, how we dealt with this, and sort of what we could learn from it. Because I don't want to make too many judgments about Hollywood Video. You have to think about this in terms of risk and loss. So we'll get into that in a little bit. We're going to walk through a basic threat model that I created. So I want to know a few things about the situation, like why were things like tapes, cash, snacks, popcorn, ice cream, sodas, etc., why were they missing? We should also ask, were the security controls in place to protect those assets proper? Those things were lost all the time, but stuff is going to get lost. What should Hollywood Video invest to make that happen? We want to know what the security culture was like at Hollywood Video. If we're in a place and nobody really believes in the security mission, if they're not really investing the time, if they don't care about it, if management's not invested on it, you're not going to have a good outcome. And we really want to know, what did Hollywood Video care about, and what do the employees care about? Ultimately, at the end of the day, it's the corporate entity and the people on the front lines that are going to have the best results in protecting security assets. And ultimately, the big question is, should this have been handled differently? I'm not sure we're going to have any definitive answers to that, but I at least want to get you thinking about that as a whole, and then sort of apply it to your own situations and say, here are the things that I protect. Am I doing the right things? So the first part of our threat model are assets, and I'll talk about a few funny things about it. So on the left there, you can see those videotapes in those actual cases that we had. The video games there, you probably can't see it in the image, but it breaks my heart as a video game collector to see the burnt-in property of Hollywood Video charred into that lovely cartridge. They did that to everyone, and it made me sad. Obviously, the tapes and stuff were a big asset too. I say tapes, we had a few DVDs, this new technology called DVD. We weren't sure if it was going to make it, this DVD technology, but we had them. Let me ask you guys, does anybody know how much a typical tape might have costed to buy to rent? So if at Hollywood Video, how much do you think it would cost for us to buy a tape? What'd you say? That's right. So this gentleman over here said 70 to 80 bucks. So a lot of people don't know this, but when you were a video store and you would get tapes in, you had to buy a special version of the tape that would often have trailers, and it was licensed differently because the movie companies didn't really want people just renting things all the time. They needed to make their money. And so a tape is actually a little bit more valuable than you might think. It wasn't like just going to Suncoast, another relic of the past, and buying a VHS tape for 20 bucks. few other things we had. There's an actual thing of popcorn, Bucket and the Butter. It was like a play on Beauty and the Beast. That's what Hollywood Video sold. We had cash in the registers, so most people at the time would use cash to buy things, although we did accept checks, if you could believe that. People would write me checks for $8 or whatever to rent a couple tapes. And then, of course, there's things like the operation of the store. So I consider that an asset in and of itself. If the store doesn't run properly, if employees don't feel safe working there, if customers don't feel good about coming in, then the whole operation is worthless. People have to want to be there. They have to get some value out of it. And of course, the employees themselves. So one good thing, if you've ever worked in retail or something like that, generally these companies are really good about protecting their employees. They don't want you trying to step in the way of some thief or something. They don't want you to get hurt. The employees themselves are an asset of the company. So I'd ask the group, like, what do you think Hollywood Video cared the most about? Anybody? Yeah, money, definitely money. I would argue as a broader concern, it's the general operation of the store. They need to be able to keep that cash flow running. The only way the store operates is if people are able to come in, have a pleasant experience, have a fun time, get the things they want, get in and out quickly. If a tape's missing, the customer probably gets over it. It's just a little bit of money. But if the store's not a good place to visit, if people aren't coming back day after day after day, then Hollywood is worthless. A few adversaries and threats that are out there. So the first is just common thieves. I found this little picture. I was a shoplifter. You can see the exposing today's most alarming crime ring. Fortunately, I didn't have any situations like that. But they did have to talk to us about people who might rob the store. You know, it's not necessarily a given that on a day-to-day basis that someone doesn't walk in with a gun, unfortunately, and tries to rob us. We were instructed that if somebody comes in and they want to do something violent, just give them what they want. You know, if somebody says, points a gun at you and says, "Give me all the cash in the register," you go, "Here you go. Would you like some cash in my wallet? Just take whatever you want. Maybe you want a few tapes. Maybe you just want some popcorn. Have a nice weekend." Give them whatever they want. The other adversary is employees. So I put another picture of this gentleman. He looks really nice, but deep down he has a dark secret, which is that he's part of the security problem. There's a few issues here. Some of it's just accidents, right? You didn't scan the tape back in. You put the tape in the wrong place on the shelf. You tripped over and dropped something. You broke something, whatever. But there's also compromises on policy. So if you don't follow the rules, if you're not scanning the things in properly, if you're not following the policies that happen, you're basically an adversary. You're an insider threat. And then there's just straight up dishonesty. I'm going to get into it a little bit, but the employees at Hollywood Video, myself included, kind of took advantage of some of this stuff to their own benefit, but you'll understand why in a moment. A few of the security tools we had to protect against these things. The first is the actual video card itself, or I'm sorry, the membership card itself. There was a process to get a membership card. You had to provide me a driver's license that had your name and address on it, and they actually required us to take credit cards so that if somebody went and rented a bunch of tapes and walked off, that theoretically we could charge them. I don't know if that ever actually happened, but I think the idea was to create a barrier to entry so that people wouldn't just come in, spend $20 to rent a bunch of tapes and never return. There's obviously the locks on the doors and things, pretty standard stuff. The point of sale system itself, that's not the actual one, but it's sort of representative of what we had to deal with. A very slow, clunky system where you scan your tapes in and it shows your inventories, etc. Those little metal detector things or radar detector things, I'm not even sure what they are, but the things that basically see when the little magnet is inside the tape, so if someone's walking out. But the problem is, of course, with something like that, if somebody walks out with inventory, I'm not going out after them. I'm like, "Oh, wow, the alarm just went off. That's nice. Next customer, please." You have things like manager oversight, and I'll put that in quotes. When I was only making minimum wage $5.15 an hour at Hollywood Video, it may not surprise you that the assistant manager wasn't exactly rolling in it. And so you're asking a lot of responsibilities on people who are not really making that much money. And as you might expect, you're not going to have the best outcomes when people aren't personally invested in it. Lastly is the lockbox for returns. So we had a little box outside, and when you're returning things, if you put it in the box by midnight of that night, you weren't late. And we would open it up, and hopefully there wasn't water in it, and we would just take all the tapes out and scan them in the store. It was a big pain. But none of this, as you can tell, is particularly foolproof. You can beat all of these security measures. It's not very hard. So let's talk about what actually happened and why Hollywood Video was such a sieve for loss. So when it comes to the tapes and games, we had a lot of excuses. The first one was, I returned it. People would say that they returned it. And then somebody came up to me at the register, and I would say, I can't rent you this tape. It shows that you still have Star Wars Episode 1 out for rental, and you need to return it, and I need my Jar Jar back. They might say something, I returned it, and honestly, it's just the honor system. You basically just have to give them the benefit of the doubt. It's not like I can prove it. I'm not going to take them to court or anything. We had broken inventory, but we also had broken inventory. There were about 4 drawers on the side of the register, and each drawer had a different kind of inventory that was considered dead inventory. A lot of them were tapes. Now, VHS tapes are very temperamental. I actually spliced them a little bit. You would literally be able, if something wasn't working right, you would literally cut pieces of tape and then sort of tape them together, and that's how you fixed VHS tapes. I've done this a few times. But then people would come in and say things are broken. Now, when you're in the middle of a shift and someone says something's broken, you're just taking their word for it. You're putting it in the drawer and you're moving on to the next thing. I can't go through some quality control process every time someone claims it's broken. With video games, it's even more difficult because it's not like I had an N64 and a PlayStation and a Dreamcast all next to each other just to boot up games all day. We had this big drawer, and one day, my boss, I don't even remember his name, said to me, "Hey Ben, you're a big video game guy. Why don't you go and see if all these games work? And if they don't work, just get rid of them or something." So I took them home, and none of them worked. I don't know what happened. Just all these games didn't work. N64 games, they fail all the time. They definitely don't work when you clean them a little bit. But they just didn't work. I don't know what happened there. There's also like common theft. So people would walk off with things. We would find cases that were emptied. We didn't have too many sophisticated locks on them. People would just sneak stuff out. I'm pretty sure other employees would be even more blatant about the theft than I was. I mean, when my boss told me to take stuff home, I didn't feel too bad about it. But I think some of my coworkers had even less qualms about these things. With the cash, we had wrong register counts sometimes. There was one situation that I had personally where my shift manager, Anthony, I'll never forget this because it was a point of contention with us, told me it was 5 o'clock, that's fine, Ben, go home. And I would say, well, I have to close out my register, Anthony. He's like, no, that's okay, I'll take over your register. Now, this guy was my manager. He told me to leave the register open. So then I come to work the next day and they said, Ben, we're writing you up. Your register was $40 short. I didn't take the money. The register wasn't closed outright, so either Anthony took it or it was miscounted at some point. But the point is we didn't follow process, and so we had consistent losses that way. The other thing with the food was every shift, managers would tell you, yeah, just take an ice cream from the freezer. Just take a soda, it's cool. We would count these things in inventory. When we would run inventory, we had to scan them in. We had to account for them. But managers would straight up tell us, just take it. It's cool. You've worked a long shift. Grab a Pepsi, grab an ice cream sandwich, grab whatever. And they just told us to do that. But there's a very deleterious effect to this. Because when you're telling employees, yeah, take this, take this, take this, don't worry about this, whatever, why should we care about security at all? Management doesn't care. Why should we care? There's some other reasons we had loss. Some of it is just constraints. As I mentioned before, employee safety was very important. Hollywood Video, to their credit, told us the right things. Never confront somebody. Always protect yourself. Don't worry about the tapes or the money or whatever. If someone's committing a crime, just let them do it. Talk to the cops later if you have to. We had really weak inventory controls. There was limited time management. We didn't get paid enough, all this stuff. The biggest problem is we must have had 10,000 tapes in the store, and for us to run inventory, we would close the store, and from like 12 to 5, we were expected to count every tape in the store by hand. That did not work. So no wonder things were missing all the time. No wonder our inventories were off. We didn't invest any time to actually track this the right way. Obviously, there was the problem of checking tapes. We would have people complain about tapes all the time, but I was not going to screen that stuff. We just couldn't do it. And I wasn't going to argue with the customers, and the store is super huge. You just can't see it all. I mentioned the bad management stuff. The managers didn't care, don't steal, but when I tell you to steal, it's okay. And I'll just close out your register later. It's fine. Log into this thing, whatever, it's cool. We don't have to follow policy. So what should you do with this information? My lesson to all of you, and what I hope you take away from this, is you should really build a threat model for whatever you're trying to protect. Anybody in the room responsible for sort of managing the protection of assets, maybe for your company or something like that? Anybody? I mean, you should really have a threat model in place. You should know all of the things that I have. Now, I put Bruce Wayne's threat model here because I found this image from Ars Technica because I thought it was so cool. This is not a perfect threat model. I disagree with it. I disagree heavily. But the point is, Bruce Wayne knew what his risks were. He knew what people he needed to protect, what kind of security controls he needed to protect the Batcave, and who his threats were. You should do the same thing. Understand who what your assets are. What do you really care to protect? And classify them. And these assets might not be traditional things. Some of them may be the reputation of the people you work with. Some of them may be, we deal with situations that have to deal with intellectual property or national security interests, just secrets, things we don't want getting out there. You have to look at your adversaries too. Our adversaries at Hollywood Video were regular people for the most part. People who wanted to get a free tape. People who wanted to get some food or whatever like that. Not exactly the most threatening people. But a lot of companies out there, a lot of people who have web applications, devices, whatever, corporate networks, etc., they have adversaries like foreign governments, nation-state actors, sophisticated hacking groups. And you need to know who's targeting you and what kind of bullseye you have on you. If you're an organization involved in things like national security, a data breach is catastrophic, not just to your business, but perhaps to the country. And so you have to take your security posture and step it up considerably. The other and last part is to sort of identify and assess your tools and their effectiveness. The only way to know if an application or a product or anything is truly secure is to go through regular manual testing where people are looking at it, not automated scanners and stuff like that. If you're not going through regular assessment, you really don't know if the tools you're using are effective enough. You're guessing. Just because somebody puts secure on the box or makes big claims, unless you can vet those claims, unless you can see documentation, unless you put those things together yourself and do the manual work, you really don't know how secure a product is. You're just guessing. And the truth is that any product can be broken with enough time, resources, and expertise. That's all I have for the prepared content, so feel free to, I would love to answer questions about anything that I talked about today, and more, especially the Hollywood Video stuff. And while I take questions, I will show you this little slide. This is the contact us stuff. If you want to get in touch with me, you want to talk about any of the stuff we talked about today, you can email me. Make sure you check out IoT Village in the Start booth. And we're giving away free copies of my colleague Ted Harrington's book, Hackable. Unfortunately, with this thing, the QR code is kind of cut off. So I don't know what I'm going to do about that. I have it on my laptop, so you could just scan it on my laptop after the event. I will make sure you get a copy of the book. We'll ship it to you. And with that all out of the way, what questions do people have? I would love to answer questions. Anybody? Anybody? Yes. What's the most stolen video? So it's probably a function of popularity and volume. So I would say, I mean, again, this is dating it. So like year 2000, episode 1, we must have had 100 tapes, maybe more. And they were also the most missing because people wanted it. It was popular at the time. Now, I'm not going to comment on the quality of this film as to not cause any controversy, but we missed a lot of it. But there were, other things would be missing too. I mean, it didn't necessarily line up with that. And it was probably because Star Wars was so plentiful, it was so visible. I think we even had a thing at the time where we would guarantee that there would be a copy in the store. I think they ordered so many that was like, if you come in, we'll have it for rent. Doesn't matter when or where. I think they ordered it that way, but then a lot of them went missing anyway. So what can I say? What other questions do people have? Anything? Anybody? Bueller? Yes. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's part of the calculus. You know, I'm not in the corporate side, so like I wasn't doing the accounting on it. But let's say you would rent a tape for $5 for 3 days or something like that. That was about what it cost. I know there were things like different tiers of pricing, like older things were a little cheaper and stuff like that. You really do need to rent a tape like 20 times to make money on it. Now, again, for a Star Wars, that wasn't so difficult. It was a little bit more difficult for like indie movies, more obscure stuff, a lot of things that were straight to video, although the things that were straight to video often were cheaper for us to get. I used to get screeners too. That was a funny thing when you get screener videos and they would be black and white and say, don't steal this video. But yeah, I don't think, ultimately, you could see that the business model kind of failed as streaming got popular and the content delivery model changed. But it was still tough to make money, I think, even back then. Yeah. Yes? How often do N64 games break? You have to really beat up those N64 games to break. All right, I'll go on another tangent real quick. So I collect video games. It's a big thing I do. I have 4,000 unique games in my video game collection. I'm a big retro game collector. And I can almost guarantee you that any NES, Super NES, Game Boy, N64, Sega Genesis game, if you didn't like dunk it in water and leave it there for a while, you can pretty much revive anything. I mean, these things are tanks. And usually when the NES, when the thing blinks and you blow on the cartridge, it's because of the contacts in the system. The carts are basically bulletproof. You're gonna have to replace the save batteries, but like those things last pretty much forever. Discs are a different story. Discs can rot, they can get scratched, etc. But those cartridges, if you clean the pins, they'll last. Yeah. Any other questions? Anybody? Anybody at all? Yes? I'm sorry, I can't hear you. I think it's very tough to say. So looking back at it, what could we have done better? I think the biggest thing is having better expectations about management and resource control. It was stupid to have us scan tapes that way and count inventory that way. It was never going to work. I don't know why they thought it was going to work with 1 or 2 people doing this for a few hours, especially because they wanted to open. So like we would close the store, but they're like, we have to open by 5 because that's when everybody gets out of work and they're going to rent tapes. It's like, well, then I'm not going to get all the inventory done. That stuff didn't work. Also, like the management had to take this stuff seriously. They should have probably, I mean, I don't think it's a big deal ultimately that they let us take things, but it was a very deleterious thing. It didn't really create a security culture. You can't do much about people swiping tapes or people trying to commit robberies and stuff like that. Nobody's willing to take the risk of stopping that stuff, and I don't think they should. But our management could have been better. And if our management would have been better, it would have been a little bit more improved. Ultimately, the shrinkage, the loss wasn't why Hollywood Video failed. It failed because of Netflix, like everything else. But it certainly didn't help, and it didn't make the store profitable as much as it could have been. So, anybody else? Yes. Yeah, so that's kind of what like a GameStop does now, right? Like if you're buying a video game, I have an axe to grind with this. When you buy a new video game from GameStop, they open it up and put the game behind the counter, and then you bring the case, and then they put the opened up game in the case, which is really bad. Would it have helped? It probably would have created other problems, because then we would have had a situation where every time somebody picks out 2 tapes, I have to go and fetch them in some gigantic thing. instead of them just bring it up and I scan it, I take their money and check out. So I feel like we'd be trading one problem for another. But that's a good question. I never thought of that. Anyone else? Anybody? 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 All right, cool. Well, actually, I have a question for all of you. Can I do one of those things where I take a selfie of all of you and you like raise your hand and stuff? I'd really appreciate it. It would make me very happy. All right, one sec. Thanks very much. If anybody wants a copy of the book, just come up here. I have cards too if you want to talk, and you can scan the QR code on my laptop.